It was just supposed to be a family dinner. Sunday evening, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the aroma of garlic wafting through the house, and the familiar hum of conversation. Nothing too special. Just another meal, just another Sunday. But everything changed the moment my sister, Tara, smirked across the table and casually dropped the bombshell. "You have 3 days to leave the house." Her words hung in the air, slicing through the conversation like a sharp knife. Mom and Dad just sat there, frozen. Silent. It was as though nothing had been said. The clinking of forks and the soft crackling of the fire in the corner were the only sounds left in the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I reached into my bag, my fingers brushing the edges of the folder I had kept hidden. Slowly, I pulled out the property records and placed them neatly on the table next to my untouched plate. The deed. The title. The evidence. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, but with a sharp edge, "you all have 24 hours. The words hung there, the silence that followed thick enough to cut through. Tara's smirk faltered, replaced with a flicker of confusion. Her fork dropped. The quiet was deafening. Mom didn't look up. Dad didn't say a word. They simply stared at their plates as if nothing had happened. Tara tried again, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "It's not personal, Sam. We just think it's time for you to move on. You've been here a long time." I looked from Tara to my parents, searching for some sign of acknowledgement, some form of resistance. But there was nothing. They just sat there, silent. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "We? You mean you and Tara, right?" "Yeah, Mom and Dad agree," Tara added, as if this was some well-orchestrated performance. Her eyes flicked toward them, waiting for their confirmation. Mom cleared her throat, glancing at me. "It's about peace, Sam. Harmony." Dad's voice was low, but it lacked the conviction I had once heard in it. "Harmony?" I repeated, my lips curling into a tight smile. "You think this is harmony?" Tara leaned forward then, elbows on the table, as though she were suddenly in charge of this conversation. "I just don't want us to keep walking on eggshells," she said with a mock sympathy in her voice. "Your energy, it's just heavy." My hands clenched around my fork. "Heavy?" Tara, who had just returned from a healing retreat in Bali, was talking about my energy being too heavy? She, who had never contributed to a single bill, never helped with a single repair, who had been living her life without a second thought about the family. I slowly put my fork down, my hands steady now, despite the fire building inside me. I reached into my bag again, pulling out the folder, the one I'd kept hidden for months, the one they thought they had no reason to worry about. I opened it, flipping through the pages, and then slid it across the table toward Tara. The deed. The one with my name on it. Signed. Notarized. Dated. I met their eyes. "Actually," I said calmly, "you all have 24 hours. For a moment, no one moved. Tara stared at the document, then at me, confusion spreading across her face. Mom blinked, her eyes darting between the paper and me. Dad's face went pale. "I don't understand," Tara said, her voice shaking, but still trying to mask her fear with an air of disbelief. This isn't real." I leaned back in my chair, my voice cold but steady. "It's very real. Signed, notarized, legally binding. Dated 18 months ago, the day I paid off the mortgage in full." Dad was silent, his face drained of color. I slid another paper across the table, receipt after receipt. I refinanced the mortgage under my name. Paid off the liens. Took over the insurance. Paid the property taxes. Fixed the leaks. Repaired the roof. You remember that, don't you, Dad? Probably not, though. You weren't here. Tara's face twisted in anger, her hands balled into fists. "So, this is about control," she spat. "You're using this too." "What? Show us how much better you are?" "No," I said, my voice even but cutting. "This is about respect. Something none of you seem to think I deserve." Tara stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. "You're kicking out your family?" Mom's voice was quiet, her tone desperate. I turned toward her, my heart heavy but resolute. "I'm reclaiming what I built. What I held together when everyone else disappeared. What I sacrificed my life for. I said, my voice softening only slightly. And you let her walk back in like she owns it all. Dad opened his mouth, but the words he spoke were weak, almost pleading. We didn't know, he mumbled, his eyes avoiding mine. You didn't want to know? I snapped. It was easier to pretend this place just stayed afloat on its own, wasn't it? Easier to pretend I was just a quiet presence in the background. Well, surprise. I'm the reason we still have a roof at all. The room went still, the weight of the truth sinking in. Tora opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off before she could. Pack your things, I said, my voice steady. All of you. By noon tomorrow, or I'll have law enforcement escort you out. Tara's face contorted in rage, her voice cutting through the tension. You wouldn't dare. I stood, pushing my chair back with a sharp scrape. I dared first, I said, meeting her gaze squarely. The silence that followed my ultimatum was deafening. Tara stood there, staring at me, her mouth opening and closing, like she was trying to find the right words but couldn't quite form them. Behind her, Mom sat still, her hands trembling in her lap, and Dad. Dad just stared at the table, avoiding my gaze. None of them moved. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, each second stretching into eternity as the weight of what I'd just done sank in. This wasn't just a confrontation. This wasn't a simple argument. This was a line in the sand. And there was no going back. I turned away, heading for the door, my fingers brushing against the cold wood of the frame. My hands were steady now, but my heart was pounding. I had just done something I had never thought possible. Something I'd thought about for years, but never had the courage to act on. I closed the door behind me, leaving the noise, the tension, and the guilt I hadn't yet allowed myself to feel. The next morning, the house felt different. No more footsteps echoing in the hallway. No more voices calling me from the kitchen or the living room. The space was too quiet, too still. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creaks of the old house settling. I didn't go looking for them. I didn't need to. I knew they were packing. I could hear them in their rooms, moving around, the shuffle of clothes, the sound of things being thrown into boxes. I wasn't sure what I expected. I had imagined so many different scenarios in my head, arguments, shouting, pleading, but this was different. This wasn't drama. This wasn't the messy fight I had anticipated. This was just the absence of them. At 8:15 a.m., I heard Emma's voice, sharp, demanding. Just bring the truck around. I don't need help, just be quick. I didn't move. I didn't go out to check, to gloat, to see the result of what I'd done. I sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window, feeling the weight of it all settle in my chest. There were no more apologies to be had, no more excuses. No more pretending. They were leaving. I heard the footsteps as they trudged up and down the stairs, carrying bags, suitcases, boxes. It was all so clinical, so final. No drama. No grand confrontation. Just the sound of the house emptying, one piece at a time. At 10:30 a.m., I passed Dad in the living room. He was sitting in his old recliner, staring at the blank TV screen. The remote rested limply in his hands, his gaze distant. He didn't look up when I walked by. He didn't say a word. I couldn't even look at him. Not yet. Not when I still felt the sting of every day I'd spent cleaning up the mess they'd left behind. Not when I still remembered how he'd abandoned me to fix everything alone while he sat back and did nothing. He was empty now, and all I could do was keep walking. I went to the kitchen. Mom was there, packing dishes into a box, still moving with the slow precision of someone who knew their place. She paused when she saw me, but didn't speak. Just a moment of shared silence, and then she continued packing. Your father doesn't know where we'll go yet, she said softly, not meeting my eyes. Emma offered her apartment, but it's small. We'll make it work. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What could I say? I wasn't going to ask if they were okay. I wasn't going to pretend that their departure had left some kind of hole in my life. I was too tired for that. Mom, I finally said, my voice tight. You let her win. You let her walk in here like she owns the place. Like I don't matter. She flinched at the words, but there was nothing she could say in return. Nothing she could offer that would take the weight of this moment off my chest. I had lived for years in the shadows of their neglect, and now the truth had come out. They had never really seen me, not for the effort I put in, not for the sacrifices I made. They only saw what they wanted to see. By 12 p.m., the last of them were gone. First Emma, then Mom, then Dad. No goodbyes. No final words. Just the sound of departure, one step after the other, and the door closing behind them. And then there was silence. I stood in the middle of the living room, my hands trembling slightly, but my body was calm. I had just forced them out of my home, the place I had saved, the place I had given everything to. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was emptiness. A hollow space where my family used to be. I locked the door behind them. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about survival. It was about standing tall when everyone else had walked away. About taking back what I had built, what I had worked for, what I had sacrificed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to see me. I wasn't adjusting myself to fit into their image of who I was supposed to be. I was finally free. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a wound that needed time to heal. The days that followed were strangely calm. The kind of calm you feel after a storm has passed, but before you're ready to rebuild. There was no sense of victory, no real sense of triumph. I had been waiting for that, waiting for the rush of satisfaction that would come with reclaiming my space, my home, my life. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just a hollow quiet. The house, which had once felt like it was suffocating under the weight of resentment and unspoken expectations, now seemed too still. Too empty. It was mine, but it didn't feel like it belonged to me. I spent the first few days cleaning, not just dusting, but really cleaning. Pulling out furniture, scrubbing down walls, washing windows until the morning light poured in unfiltered, crisp and clean. The house needed to feel like a place I could breathe in again. I started in the kitchen. The one place I had never fully claimed. It had always felt like a communal space, a place where meals were made for everyone, not just for me. But now, I arranged the counter just how I liked it. I placed the coffee maker where it felt right, moved the fruit bowl to the corner by the window, and finally tossed out the old set of knives that had been here when they left. The kitchen had always been a place of duty, but now it was a place of purpose. My purpose. Next, I moved into the living room. The room that had once been the heart of the house. Where we had gathered, where we had fought, where we had sat in silence for hours, pretending things were fine. I moved the couch around, changed the throw pillows, and turned the TV off. I didn't want to watch anything. I didn't want noise. I just wanted to be here, in the stillness, for once. There were moments when I walked through the hallways and had to pause, my breath catching in my throat. Every corner held memories, moments of laughter, of tears, of frustration. Even in the quiet, I could still feel the ghosts of everything that had happened here. But something had shifted. I wasn't waiting for them to come back anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for them to acknowledge what I had done, what I had given up. I wasn't waiting for them to see me. I was seeing myself. The garden was next. I had always hated the rose bushes. They were too much effort, too little return. Mom had kept them because they were Dad's favorite, but he never bothered to take care of them. He never bothered to help her when she needed it, and yet, those rose bushes were a symbol of something he would never understand. I pulled them out, one by one, feeling their roots twist and yank from the soil. And then I planted lavender and rosemary. Things that didn't just survive, they thrived. As the days passed, I started to feel like the house was changing with me. It didn't feel like their home anymore. It didn't feel like the place I had spent years trying to make work for people who didn't care. It felt like mine. Finally. One afternoon, I walked past the guest room, the one that had been my office, then Emma's suite, and then mine again. It had become a symbol of everything I had let slide. Everything I had given up just to keep the peace. I stared at the door for a moment before I turned the knob and stepped inside. It was no longer just an office. It was a place I had built for myself. A real workspace with a standing desk and shelves for my books. I rearranged the room, hung a new painting on the wall. The light that poured through the window in the late afternoon felt warmer now, like it was offering something I had been waiting for, but had never been able to claim. I still worked, still went through the motions. But now, there was no noise behind me. No demands, no interruptions, no passive-aggressive comments about my lifestyle. There was just me and the work, the way it had always been meant to be. It wasn't easy, though. There were still nights when I would sit in the dark, the weight of the past sitting heavy on my chest. I could hear the echoes of their voices, Tara's, demanding, cold, Mom's, soft and pleading, Dad's, quiet, withdrawn. And the silence that followed felt like a constant reminder of everything that had been broken. But each day, the house felt a little more like mine. A little more like a place I had earned, not just inherited. And then the letter arrived. It was a simple white envelope. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mom's. My stomach twisted as I held it in my hands. The familiar loopy script, the kind she used for birthday cards, for notes left on the fridge. The handwriting that had been a constant presence in my life, even when I hadn't wanted it. I opened it slowly, the paper feeling stiff between my fingers. Inside was a 2-page letter. Neat, no crossings out, no signs of correction. It was as if she had written it with calm deliberation, the same way she had always written her cards and notes. She said she forgave me. Forgave me as if I were the one who had wronged them. As if standing up for myself, for the home I had saved, was something that needed to be absolved. She said she hoped one day I'd come to my senses. She mentioned how Emma was doing her best, how they were managing in their new apartment. She ended with, "We still love you, Evelyn, even if we don't understand you anymore." I stared at the letter for a long time, my fingers gripping it tighter. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. I had spent years hoping for some kind of validation from them, some sign that they saw me. But this wasn't it. This wasn't what I needed. Not anymore. I folded the letter slowly, carefully, and dropped it into the trash bin beside the recycling. It wasn't out of anger. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. I just didn't need it anymore. For years, I had begged for crumbs, validation, recognition, love wrapped in conditions. Now, I was full. I had finally found my own worth. And that was enough. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the absence of them, the echo of footsteps no longer wandering through the hallways. It was something deeper. The air was lighter, though still thick with the remnants of years spent in silence, in tension, in waiting for things to change that never did. But now, the change had come. And it wasn't just the space I had reclaimed, it was me. I spent the next few weeks diving into my own world, doing everything I had been too exhausted to enjoy for so long. I painted the walls of the living room, a soft beige that filled the space with warmth. I picked up the guitar I hadn't touched in years and began strumming out random tunes. I read books I had long forgotten. I cooked meals without wondering if I was being too much, too noisy, too in the way. For the first time, the house was mine. And for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for it. The days blurred together in a way that felt peaceful. I wasn't racing to meet deadlines. I wasn't waiting for calls that never came. I was just existing. I was free. But there were still moments when I found myself standing still, staring at the door, listening for sounds of footsteps that would never come again. There were days when I had to remind myself that I wasn't waiting for them to come back. That this was my home now. I had been so focused on reclaiming the physical space that I had forgotten to take a breath, to let go of the emotional weight that had held me captive for so long. I had spent years trying to live up to their expectations, bending to their will, waiting for them to finally see me. But now? Now, I was just living for me. One afternoon, I was in the garden, kneeling by the lavender plants I had carefully nurtured. I was pulling weeds from between the rows, my hands dirtied from the effort. The sunlight filtered through the trees above, casting long shadows across the freshly turned soil. It was peaceful, quiet. But as I worked, something nagged at me, just at the edge of my thoughts. I had come so far, yet there was still something left unsaid. I didn't need them to understand me, but I needed to understand myself. I found myself standing at the front door that evening, staring out at the street. The world outside was still moving. The cars passed by. People were still going to work, still living their lives, still worrying about things that didn't matter to me anymore. I closed the door behind me and turned back into the house. It was time to let go. Not of the house. Not of the memories. But of the idea that I needed their approval, their validation. I had spent years asking for something that wasn't mine to claim. It wasn't their love I needed to survive. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the contacts. I found the number I had been avoiding for weeks. Emma's name blinked back at me. I didn't press call, not yet. But I didn't delete it either. Maybe I would reach out. Maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't looking for a reason to have them back. I was living for myself now. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be sorry for it. The doorbell rang late that evening. I had almost forgotten what it sounded like. I opened it without hesitation. Standing there, holding a small envelope in her hands, was Mom. Her face was tired, her eyes red-rimmed, and her hair falling out of its usual neat style. It was the first time in months that I had seen her look so human. "Mom?" I said softly, stepping back to let her in. I thought I should come by," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I need to apologize. I didn't know how to respond. I had prepared for this moment in my head 100 times, but nothing could have prepared me for seeing her stand there, vulnerable, lost." "Why?" I asked. "Why now?" She stepped inside, not waiting for me to close the door. "Because I didn't see you, Evelyn. I never did. I saw the daughter I wanted to see, but not the person you became. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying out of the way. But I see now. I left you to carry everything alone." The words cut through me, sharp and unexpected. But I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I felt the weight of everything finally breaking. Finally, being put down. "I know you're angry," she continued, her voice shaky. "But I want you to know I'm sorry. I didn't support you when you needed me. I didn't give you the love you deserved." I blinked, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. "You can't undo what happened, Mom," I said quietly, my voice steady but thick. "But I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Because I don't need you to fix it. I fixed it for myself." I turned, walking away from her. She stayed by the door, silent. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the hall, but I didn't turn around. I had done the hard part. I had found my strength, my resolve. The door had closed, and I had no intention of opening it again. But for the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I was free.